As we were just saying, it was just a year ago yesterday that we went to the polls, an election that ended a tumultuous 9 years of coalition government under three different Prime Ministers. Scott Morrison, remember, was the first Prime Minister since John Howard to last from one election to the next. We had 6 changes of Prime Minister in just 11 years, but Morrison still couldn't win it. Labor came to power under Anthony Albanese.
Together, we can take advantage of the opportunity for Australia to be a renewable energy superpower.
Yeah, Albo there on election night. In his own electorate in the inner west of Sydney, I was there that night. It's always great to see history being made. But how's he going, do you reckon? I asked commentator and former ALP strategist Cameron Milner.
Well, 1 year down and a little less over 2 to go to the next federal election, I guess the government's meeting expectations. And I say expectations because they were asked to do so little when they got to government because of a small target campaign that actually had a pretty small agenda, and most of that's actually been fulfilled in the first year in government.
They did promise to reduce electricity prices, cost by $275 a year. They did promised to ease up the cost of living, and they did promise to keep interest rates low. So on those bases, they've actually broken a lot of key undertakings.
Well, the Prime Minister did promise cheaper electricity, and you're right, prices have gone up. He promised cost of living relief, and that was obviously targeted by Jim Chalmers in the last budget. And certainly in terms of the overall issue around interest rates, yes, they have gone up. But that's because of the hyper-inflationary environment that we've received, mainly from overseas inflationary forces.
Yeah, we talk about this, and certainly the government talks a lot about the international factors and all the rest of it. But the point is that their key undertakings, especially on those hip pocket issues of electricity and general cost increases and mortgage payments, they just haven't been met. And now I concede immediately that you don't see a great punishment for that in the polls at the moment, but it must be a worry for the government as they go deeper into this term. You get over the honeymoon period. Surely the fact that they haven't delivered on these cost of living pressures is going to hurt them.
Well, only time will tell, obviously. In the next election will be the referendum on cost of living and Labor's opportunity to go back to the electorate. But there's 2 years to go, and Jim Chalmers has brought down his second budget, which I think was an exceptionally good budget. He's got 2 more to go in this life of this parliament. So I think Labor's certainly got the firepower to fight the economic fight when it comes to the next election.
Yeah, look, I think the surplus is welcome, but it's lucky, and they can't really claim credit for it. It was a factor of previous budgets rather than anything they've done this year, but you bank that money any day you could. I think one of the interesting things, Cameron, is electricity prices and the big focus on renewable energy, additional investment, additional regulation on that front. If that continues to drive up electricity prices, and that hurts a lot of working families, as you know, traditional Labor voters and swinging voters, is that going to be the real Achilles heel for Labor?
Well, certainly Labor's very focused in terms of making sure that we've got the right amount of renewables coming in, while also making sure we protect what we've got at the moment. And it's a difficult balancing act. And you're right. I mean, we have to get that right to make sure that there's downward pressure on cost of living, electricity, mortgage rates, just the general cost of buying groceries. All those things are going to be factors at the next federal election. But Labor's got 2 years to work those things through.
Yeah, I see it a bit differently. I think that what they've put in place there is going to be disastrous. We're going to see continuing electricity shortages and cost increases, and that will create a lot of strife for them. But we'll have to wait and see how all this plays out over the next couple of years. One issue that you've focused on, and is a big issue in political debate now, and you've written about this, is the voice, of course. The voice and the referendum and the outcome is going to be central for Anthony Albanese. Obviously, if the referendum wins, even though it's supposed to be above politics, this issue, it'll be seen as an historic victory for Anthony Albanese and his government. What about if the referendum is defeated?
Well, look, I think the issue around the voice, and you and I both agree, Chris, on this issue from a policy position, has regrettably been put into a partisan position, and it's been weaponised. It's been weaponised by Labor to cause greatest harm and damage to Peter Dutton and the Liberals. So rather than seeking a bipartisan outcome, rather than actually reconciling on reconciliation, what we have now is a scrappy, ugly fight. And that's really problematic, I think, for the yes-no case. So yes, if Albanese wins, he'll go down as a legacy of Labor history and reconciliation if he wins the yes vote. If the no vote occurs, I think we'll be a very divided nation, and regrettably, reconciliation will have been set back for a generation. And you've written about that, and I agree with you, Chris. I think there's a real risk here that the Prime Minister has decided to go all in on this, and yet the published polling and other sorts of things want to say that people actually want to see bipartisan support for a position going forward.
Yeah, what interests me about your position as a man steeped in the Labor side of politics is you agree with me that you can't blame the fact that it's become so partisan just on the coalition for opposing it. It was Anthony Albanese on election night a year ago when he put this front and centre that actually injected a level of partisanship into the issue that really never should have been there.
Well, that's right. And the history, obviously, both Liberal governments, when they were looking at this issue, and Labor oppositions, was there was a far more collegiate view of the issue going forward. What's happened is that the Prime Minister has decided to make it the Albanese voice, and I think that's an issue. He's refused to provide the detail that undecided voters are craving, and he's decided to weaponise the issue. Now, that might work for electoral gain for Labor. I'm not sure it works for reconciliation.
Yeah, fascinating stuff. A very, very toxic debate at the moment. Thanks so much for joining us, Cameron.
Thanks so much for your time, Chris.